Welcome to a deep dive into ancient Chinese history. You've given us some really fascinating stuff on Duke Huan of Qi and his whole rivalry with the state of Chu.
It's a really interesting period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to be jumping into power struggles and diplomatic maneuvering and get this, maybe even some ancient pig diplomacy.
Yeah, intriguing, right?
Yeah.
What we're going to be uncovering today is how Duke Huan, working with his, brilliant strategist, Guan Zhong, how they managed to make Qi solidify it as the first hegemon of the spring and autumn period.
Okay, now hold on, hegemon. I got to say, that sounds kind of intimidating.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it basically means the most powerful ruler, in a system with all these smaller states.
Right.
You can think about it like a captain of a team, but instead of players, you're leading entire states.
Oh, I get it. So not just a king, but the kingmaker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the source material you gave us dives into this period in ancient Chinese history, the spring and autumn period, which ran roughly from 790-71 to 476 BCE. And this was a time of just massive upheaval in China.
So kind of like Game of Thrones, but ancient China edition.
You could say that. The once really powerful Zhou dynasty, they were weakening.
Right.
And it created this power vacuum. So naturally, these ambitious rulers, they were eager to, fill it.
Of course.
And one of these ambitious rulers was the leader of the state of Chu.
Which was in the south, right?
Exactly, in the south.
And Chu was not messing around. They actually declared themselves king, putting themselves on par with the Zhou king.
They did.
That's a power move.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a power move if I've ever heard of one.
Right.
Yeah, it was a direct challenge to the established order.
Right.
And it really sent shockwaves through the other states. Chu was basically saying, we're a force to be reckoned with, and we're not afraid of anyone, not even the Zhou king.
So you've got these two major players, right? Qi in the north, getting stronger under Duke Huan, and then Chu in the south, flexing their muscles, challenging the status quo.
Yeah, and to really grasp how significant this clash was, you need to understand this concept of the mandate of heaven.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Have you?
Yeah, but maybe a little refresher wouldn't hurt?
Okay, sure, yeah. So basically, it's this idea that a ruler's right to rule, it comes from a divine source. From heaven.
Okay.
So if a ruler was just benevolent, they had the mandate of heaven.
Right.
But if they were corrupt, incompetent, they could lose it. And that could lead to all these natural disasters, rebellions, even their downfall.
Wow.
So by declaring themselves king, Chu was saying they had this divine right.
Okay.
Which, of course, the Zhou king saw as a huge threat.
Right. So this wasn't just a political power struggle. It was also this battle for legitimacy in the eyes of heaven.
Yeah, you got it. And it's within this whole context, right, of this dynasty that's crumbling and all these states saying that they deserve to have the mandate of heaven. That's where Duke Huan and Guan Zhong, they saw an opportunity
to assert their own dominance?
Yes, to assert Qi's dominance.
Not necessarily through brute force though, right?
Right, not just through brute force, but by being much more clever, using strategic alliances and really understanding the game of power. They recognized that to become, the top dog, they couldn't just conquer everyone.
Right.
They had to be seen as the ones who were upholding order, upholding tradition.
Even as the old order was falling apart.
Precisely, yeah.
Wow.
And that's really where, this rivalry with Chu becomes central to their rise to power.
So how did Qi under, Duke Huan and Guan Zhong, how did they start to make their move? Did they just go head-to-head with Chu right away?
Well, no, not right away.
Okay.
I mean, Guan Zhong, he was known for being incredibly strategic. So first, he implemented all these reforms that transformed Qi, made it much more powerful.
I mean, these reforms sound really crucial.
It worked.
What kind of changes did he make?
So he really focused on building up a strong economic base.
Right.
Because he knew that wealth meant power.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. So he did things like streamline taxation, he encouraged trade, and he even standardized weights and measures.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, to make their economy way more efficient.
Smart.
Yeah.
It's you got to have a really solid foundation if you want to build a skyscraper.
Exactly.
You can't just build it on sand.
Yeah, no, exactly. A good foundation is key.
Okay, so he's shoring up their economy. What else?
Well, he also reorganized their whole military, dividing it up into these specialized units so it'd be much more effective in battle.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And he also streamlined their administration, all the governance stuff.
Okay.
To make sure they could, manage Qi's growing power.
It sounds like they were getting a lot done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were really getting their act together.
Meanwhile, Chu is off making these grand pronouncements.
Exactly. They were all about these bold declarations.
Right.
While Qi was quietly building up their strength and influence.
Under Guan Zhong's very wise guidance, it seems.
Yeah, Guan Zhong, he really knew what he was doing.
Yeah, Guan Zhong, he really knew what he was doing.
Right. So Qi is becoming a force to be reckoned with.
Definitely.
But it seems inevitable that they would clash with Chu at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was only a matter of time.
Right. So how did this, simmering tension finally boil over?
Well, that's where the story takes a really interesting turn.
Okay.
The source material mentions this, rather curious incident, and it involves a concubine.
A concubine.
Yes, Duke Huan's concubine.
Okay.
And this is where you really see Guan Zhong's strategic mind at work.
I'm intrigued. I want to hear more about this concubine incident.
Yeah, this is where things get good.
A concubine? Okay, now you've got my attention. How does a concubine play into all this high-stakes politics? Well, she was originally from the state of Qi.
Okay.
Which, if you remember, was a vassal state of Chu.
Right.
So Duke Huan, for reasons that aren't totally clear, he sends this concubine back to Qi.
Sending your concubine back to her home state. I feel like that's got to be some kind of political move in itself, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not a gesture of goodwill, is it?
Right.
And Qi, probably with Chu backing them up, they do something really audacious.
What's that?
They remarried her to someone else.
Oh, no way. Talk about an insult.
Right. I mean, that's a direct slap in the face to Duke Huan.
It's like they're saying, we don't recognize your authority.
Exactly. They weren't just insulting Duke Huan personally, they were challenging Qi's power.
So this is where Guan Zhong steps in.
Oh, absolutely. This is where his strategic genius really shines.
So what does he do?
He sees this whole concubine situation, which seems kind of like a personal matter, and he recognizes it for what it is, an opportunity. He urges Duke Huan to use this as an excuse, a pretext, to attack Qi.
Okay, so they're using this minor incident to trigger a much bigger conflict.
Exactly. It's classic strategic provocation.
So I'm guessing a war between Qi and Chu is now inevitable.
You might think so, but remember, Guan Zhong always has a plan.
Right. He's always thinking a few steps ahead.
Exactly. He knew that fighting a long, drawn-out war with Chu would be risky and really expensive. So he comes up with a different strategy.
Let me guess. It involves more diplomacy.
You know it. Guan Zhong was a master of playing the political game. He knew that to really weaken Chu, he had to undermine their legitimacy.
Which is a tall order because Chu had already declared themselves the equal of the Zhu king, right?
Right, but Guan Zhong, he's got a few tricks up his sleeve. He accuses Chu of basically disrespecting the Zhu king and uses this to try and turn the other states against them.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. First, he points out that Chu hasn't been sending their annual tribute to the Zhu king.
Which was more of a symbolic gesture than anything else, right?
Yeah, but those symbols, they carried a lot of weight back then.
Right, it's like forgetting to send a birthday card, you know?
Exactly. It might seem like a small thing, but it sends a message.
Right, it says something about the state of the relationship.
Precisely. And then Guan Zhong hits them with his second accusation, and this one is way more serious.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
He brings up this incident from the past where a previous Zhu king had died.
Oh, no.
And get this, he died under mysterious circumstances while in territory that was controlled, at the time, by Chu.
Ooh, that's gotta be a sensitive subject.
You bet it is. They couldn't just ignore that one. Chu tries to deflect, of course.
What do they say?
Well, they claim that the area where the king died, it wasn't actually under their control at the time.
Convenient.
Right. And then they basically try to shift the blame to, get this, the river god.
They're blaming a river god.
It sounds crazy, but it kind of worked. The Zhu king, he was just happy to have Chu back in line, sending tribute again.
So they managed to wiggle out of that one. But what about the dead king? Did they ever address that?
Well, the Zhu king, maybe just relieved that the whole tribute thing was settled, he decides to, let's say, extend an olive branch.
Okay.
He sends this unusual gift to Chu.
What was it?
A live pig.
A pig? That's a weird peace offering, even for ancient China.
Not just any pig, though. This pig, it had been blessed in the ancestral temple.
Oh, so it's like a sacred pig.
Exactly. A powerful symbol of forgiveness, of starting fresh.
It's the Zhu King's way of saying, let's just put this whole thing behind us. Okay.
Basically, yeah. And for Chu, it was a pretty big win. They managed to avoid a war on two fronts. with Qi and the Zhou king. But I don't think Guan Zhong was fooled for a second.
No, I bet he saw right through it.
Yeah, he's playing the long game here.
This is all so fascinating. I can't wait to hear what happens next. So while this whole pig diplomacy thing is going on, I'm guessing things are still kind of tense between Qi and Chu.
Oh yeah, the tension was still there for sure. The sources actually mention another confrontation this time at a place called Zhaoling.
Okay, so did they finally go to war?
Not quite. It seems like at this point both sides realized that an all-out war wouldn't really be in anyone's best interests.
Makes sense. Wars are expensive.
Exactly, and unpredictable.
Right.
And then Chu, kind of surprisingly, they decide to formally acknowledge Qi as the leader.
Really?
Yeah, they basically said, okay, you're the top dog. For now, at least.
So they were just like playing the long game.
It seems that way, right? I mean, it was a pragmatic decision. Why risk everything in a costly war when they could just acknowledge Qi's power and maintain their own position?
So it's less about who's right and more about who's got the power.
Exactly.
Okay, but this concession, this wasn't just about Qi and Chu, right?
No, not at all.
This was about the entire, like, the whole political landscape.
It was huge.
It was basically an acknowledgement that the old order, you know, with the Zhou dynasty calling all the shots, that was over.
Exactly.
It was giving way to something new.
And that something new was, well, Duke Huan's vision for a more stable China, a China where Qi was calling the shots.
Right, as the hegemon. But how did Duke Huan actually plan to solidify this new order? He's got a vision, now he's going to make it a reality.
Well, he decided to call a grand assembly of all the states.
Okay, a big meeting.
Yeah, at this place called Qi in 651 BCE. And this was like a really pivotal moment in the spring and autumn period because it gave Duke Huan the chance to officially make himself hegemon.
I can imagine getting all those rulers with all their egos and ambitions into one room. That couldn't have been easy.
Oh, I know. It definitely wasn't a walk in the park.
Was there any drama? Were there any rulers who tried to, like, boycott the whole thing?
Oh, there's always drama when you're dealing with ambitious rulers.
Right.
Remember King Hui?
The Zhou king who sent the pig.
Pig king, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he was not exactly thrilled about this assembly.
Why not? I mean, Duke Huan was claiming to be upholding the king's authority.
Right, but even a mostly symbolic king, they still have their opinions.
Right.
So King Hui, he actually tried to secretly discourage some rulers from attending, especially the ruler of Zheng.
Oh, wow. That's some next-level political maneuvering.
It is, isn't it?
He's trying to sabotage the whole thing.
Yeah.
How did Duke Huan react to this? I mean, he had stuck his neck out for this king.
He was furious, understandably.
Right.
But before things could escalate, fate stepped in.
Oh, what happened?
King Hui died.
He died.
Yeah, talk about a plot twist, right?
Wow. So what happened to the assembly? Did it fall apart without the Zhou king's support?
Actually, no. It actually helped Duke Huan.
Really?
Yeah, he saw his chance and he took it. He immediately backed the rightful heir, the Zhou crown prince.
Smart move.
Yeah, the prince was obviously very grateful for Qi's support.
And a grateful ally is a useful ally.
Exactly. So the new Zhou king, he agrees to the assembly.
Of course he does.
And he even sends a high-ranking representative.
Wow, that's a big win for Duke Huan.
Oh, absolutely. This was huge because it showed everyone that he had the Zhou king on his side.
Right, even if it was, you know, more symbolic than anything else.
Yeah, but those symbols, they mattered.
So the assembly at Qi finally happened.
It did.
What did they actually do at this assembly? Like, what were the outcomes?
Well, first of all, it basically formalized Duke Huan's position as the hegemon.
Okay.
It was like everyone was there to say, okay, you're the guy.
It was like his coronation.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But Duke Huan, he didn't just want to be the most powerful ruler.
Right.
He used the assembly to try and create a more stable order.
So he actually wanted to achieve something. He wasn't just in it for the power.
That's right. He laid out a bunch of rules and principles that he said everyone should follow.
Like what?
For example, he banned younger brothers from usurping their older brothers for the throne, which is a big problem back then.
Right, causing all sorts of chaos.
Yeah, it was a mess. And he created clear rules for succession, making it clear that only sons born to the primary wife could be the heir.
Oh, wow. So he's really trying to, like, codify things, make everything more organized.
Exactly. He wanted to make the whole system more predictable, more stable.
Right, because instability leads to conflict.
Exactly.
And conflict leads to, well, more problems for everyone.
Yep. And by framing these rules as, in line with tradition and the mandate of heaven, he was able to get everyone to agree to them.
It's amazing how he managed to balance his own ambition with this, like, genuine desire for stability.
It's really impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
He understood that true power isn't just about conquering people.
It's about creating a system where everyone, even your rivals, benefits from following your lead.
Precisely. And this reminds me of this very interesting story from the assembly about the Zhou envoy.
Oh, tell me more.
So the envoy arrives at Qi,
Yeah.
and he's got all these gifts for Duke Huan, right? But he insists that Duke Huan shouldn't have to come down from the platform to receive them.
Because of the Zhou envoy's seniority.
Yeah, as a sign of respect.
I bet Duke Huan had to think carefully about that one.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, refusing would be seen as disrespectful to the Zhou king.
Right.
But accepting this special treatment could make him seem arrogant.
Exactly. It was a delicate situation.
So what did Duke Huan do?
Well, Guan Zhong, ever the strategist, he steps in again. He reminds Duke Huan that the whole point of this assembly is to uphold the king's authority.
Right?
And that his actions would speak louder than words.
Oh, well, that's good.
So Duke Huan listens to him. He comes down from the platform, greets the envoy respectfully, takes the gifts, and then he goes back up to his position.
That's so smart.
Isn't it? It's subtle, but it's a really powerful way of showing everyone that he respects the Zhou dynasty, even as he's becoming the most powerful man in China.
It's a brilliant mix of, like, ambition and diplomacy.
Exactly. And this really highlights how power in ancient China, and really throughout history, it's not just about military strength.
Right. It's also about understanding all these subtle social and political dynamics.
Precisely. It's about knowing when to assert your dominance and when to show restraint and respect.
Wow. This deep dive into ancient China has been fascinating. We've seen ambition, we've seen rivalry, we've seen strategic brilliance, and yes, we've even seen some pig diplomacy.
I told you it would be a wild ride.
You were right. And I think the big takeaway here is that these seemingly small gestures, these symbolic acts, they can actually be incredibly powerful, especially when you're dealing with questions of power, legitimacy, and authority.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that even today, those subtle gestures and symbols, they still carry a lot of weight.
So pay attention to those seemingly small details because they might just reveal something much bigger about what's really going on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into ancient Chinese history.